All right, guys. The name of this message is going to be Mattathias. Mattathias. Matthathias. Mattathias. And that name means gift of God or gift of Jehovah. This sermon, in a way, you could say it picks up from a sermon that I did a week ago. I did a sermon called London Bridges, I Understand. And in that sermon, I was basically talking to some people and I was explaining, listen, God wants to do something for you. He wants to restore the years that the cankerworms and the palmer worms and the locusts ate up and took away from you. He wants to give you back what the enemy has come to take from you. He really wants to give you restoration, give you that life that you want so bad, that life of life and life more abundant. He wants to give you so much more. But the thing is, you're probably going to have to accept some things that you may have a hard time accepting. He may be showing you some things, giving you revelation, giving you insight on some things that if you accept what he's telling you, it's something that could rub other folks the wrong way. It's something that could possibly go against tradition, go against the norm, something that's going to cause you to have to get outside of the box, outside of your comfort zone, and it's going to make you make others feel like they're out of their comfort zone. You know what I mean? And so that's what that message was about. Getting ready for what God has for you, but also being willing to accept what he's trying to get you to agree with him on. And I said, it's kind of like being under a bridge. God is wanting you to understand something, but another way of looking at the word understand is to take it and move the word under and stand around and make it stand under. Understand, stand under. In order to understand what God is trying to get you to see, you have to be willing to stand under it. Stand under this bridge of protection that he's offering you. For whatever the enemy tries to throw your way, for being obedient to what God is trying to get you to accept. So this sermon, Mattathias, like I said, it picks up from it, and this sermon is for the people who have said yes. There may have been people who said, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to grab onto what God is trying to show me, trying to tell me, trying to get me to see. It's something that's going to rub some folks the wrong way. I want to fit in. I want to blend in. I don't want any disruptions in my life. I don't want any confrontation. I don't want people mad at me because, what God is wanting me to believe goes against their religiosity. It goes against their man-made traditions. It goes outside of their comfort zone, and I don't want anybody breathing down my neck about anything. I'm just going to do my own thing. This isn't for you. I'm sorry. This message is for those who have decided, yes, I'm going to go for the gold. I'm going along with what God is showing me, and I want all that God has to offer me, that he wants to give me because of my obedience and being willing to accept what he's trying to show me. And so this sermon is basically like words of encouragement and things to keep in mind as you pray and wait for what it is that God is about to do. And I'm going to start out here in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, just this first verse. It says, a good name is better than precious ointment in the day of death than the day of one's birth. Right here is saying something that is a little bit different from how people view birth and death. We look at birth as a joyous time. Someone being born, a baby being born is this amazing time, something to celebrate, and it is. And a lot of times when someone dies, we get sad, we weep, we mourn, we just fall all out at the funeral, the whole 9 yards. It's such a sad time, but this particular verse kind of messes with our perspective on life and death. It actually lets us know that it's actually a little better for the day that someone dies than for when they're born. And we might say, well, why is that? That's kind of crazy. That doesn't make sense. It sounds like you're saying we should celebrate someone's death, someone's passing. But some people will look at it this way. When someone is born, yeah, it's an amazing time. This miraculous child has entered into the world. But we know as we get further and further into these end times, we know how the world's going to be. We know things are going to get crazier. And there's no telling what that baby, once it grows up into adulthood, is going to have to go through. Things that we may not have gone through. So they may go through a rough time, but when they die, even though they're gone, if they're a Christian, they get to move on to a better place. And any aches, pains, any sadness, depression, any illness, disease, any of the stuff that we go through here on earth, that person no longer has to go through, because they're not in this flesh anymore. They're just a spirit man in heaven now. And so even though it's sad for us, really it's not sad for that person, because they're somewhere where they're just having a good old time. They're not they're not concerned about what we're doing here. They've got some good stuff going on up there in heaven. So when you really stop to think about it, life and death, from a different perspective of how we usually would, you kind of stand back and look at it and think, well, okay, I can see that. I can see how someone passing on when they're a believer on Jesus isn't necessarily this bad thing. Yeah, we're sad, but they're happy now. They're the happiest they've ever been. And so I'm starting out with this verse to show you what I mean when I say God opening up your perspective, getting you to see something that you didn't really see, getting you to accept a reality, a revelation of something that is just different from what people would consider the norm. But let's keep going here. Going to Philippians chapter 1, starting at verse 21. The Apostle Paul says this, for to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. He knows that to be alive, he's living for Christ. It's a good thing, because Christ came to give us life, and life more abundant. However, he says to die is to gain. And for us as Christians, that doesn't really make any sense. What do you mean to die is to gain? When you became a Christian and gave your life over to Christ, you gained a lot then. You gained so much. You get the joy and the peace of mind, the joy that the world can't take away, and the peace that passes all understanding. You get all these things, the amazing life that God gives you. So to say that you gain more from dying, what is that about? But he understands what is waiting on him after death, because really it's just his body, his mortal body that passes, but his soul lives on. And so he's looking at the big picture. And listen, we see from this that he is not afraid of death the way many of us are, even as Christians who've been Christians for so many years. Elders, even today, still fear death, unfortunately. But with the Apostle Paul, we see that death isn't something that intimidates him. It's like he's got that mindset of death, where is your sting? Verse 22, it says, but if I live in the flesh, this is the fruit of my labor, yet what I shall choose I wot not. For I am in strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better. And it's like he's saying, I'm kind of in a dilemma with this. I'm kind of conflicted. I want to be here, but at the same time, I want to be with Christ. And so it's almost like he's saying, here, while I'm alive, I got this traveling ministry and I can go teach Christ to people. I can tell people about Christ and explain to them the concept of salvation and lead them to salvation in Jesus Christ. But if I die, I get to go be with Christ. So I can do the Christ thing here and introduce y'all to Christ the best way that I can from a spiritual point of view. But if I pass on, I actually get to go be with him face to face. And so it's like he's saying, man, which option sounds good right now? They both sound kind of good, but getting on that good old gospel ship and going home really don't sound so bad right now. Verse 24, nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful for you. So he's saying, even though me going on and departing and being with Christ is beneficial to me, me staying here and helping you out and mentoring you guys out is beneficial for you all. And so it's like the reality sets in of, it's like he's in a way laying down his desire to be able to help people. He wants to go home, but he's saying, no, I think it's better to be here because it's going to be more beneficial to you guys to have me here explaining the gospel to you before I go on to be with the gospel, the living word. And so we see that the Apostle Paul, once again, is someone who really is thinking outside of the box. He's someone that wants to stand back and try to look at the whole thing, the whole spectrum, the whole perspective, not just kind of home in on just one little concept that makes people feel comfortable. He wants to stand back and look at life and death and the benefits of it all, the ups and downs of it all, versus just trying to say, well, life is sweet and death is going to be terrible. He's looking at the whole thing. And let's finally go to 1 Corinthians. Let's see what Paul says here. It says in verse 12 of chapter 13, for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known. So it's like he's saying, there are things that we just don't fully grasp right now. There are things that it's almost like we're trying to look through this blurry glass to try to get something, to try to get a glimpse of a picture that's not quite in the best focus for us to see, for us, to have a good perspective of, for our eyes and our brain to fully grasp what we're seeing. But there's coming a time where things will start to make sense, where we see face-to-face reality. We see things for what it is, things that we didn't get, things that were hard for us to comprehend or hard for us to understand or stand under will begin to make sense, and it'll be crystal clear. We will be able to stand back and see the whole picture. It won't be all blurry. It'll all make sense to us. And so the funny thing about that is, from what I just got done reading in Philippians, we already know that Paul is one to think outside the box and really go deep with how he views things. But even though he knows his mind has been opened by God, he still goes on to let us know, hey, there's some things that we still don't get. There's things that I still don't fully understand. And I've started to learn a lot since I've had my Damascus Road experience, since God opened up my eyes to see what he wanted me to see. I've learned a lot, but I even know now that there is still more for me to learn. There's still more stuff for me to understand. There's still more things that I don't quite have completely figured out yet, but I know there's coming a time where I'm going to learn more and learn more and learn more, and there's going to be some things that when I learn it, it's probably going to go totally against the grain. It's going to be something that people are going to be like, wait, what? That's not how we saw it. That's not how we have perceived things after all these years. But he's saying, I know that that will happen. There's a time period, a time and a place for things to be brought forth, things for me to grow in and understand in, and I accept that. It's like he's saying, I'm willing to understand or stand under what gets revealed to me every period of time, that something is released for me to fully grasp. I don't want to turn it down. I don't want to deny it. I want to follow Christ and go with the flow of God, not with what the world says, not with what even some of my own family or some of my own church brethren have to say. If it's something that isn't lining up with what God is showing me, I'm going to go with what God is showing me. So now, last place I want to take you to is Acts chapter 9. And we're going to see how Paul got to this point of having this type of renewed mindset where he can say, okay, I really don't know it all. I really don't have it all together. I have a lot to learn, but I'm open for whatever it is that God is wanting to throw my way. I want to learn it. I want to grasp it. I want to understand and stand under it. What happened before he got to this point? Well, before he got to this point, he wasn't called Paul yet. He was still called Saul. Look at Acts chapter 9 at the beginning. It says this, and Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. So as I've gone over numerous times, we know what Saul was about. He was one that persecuted Christians. He believed in the same God, but he hadn't fully embraced his son Jesus Christ. He was still very much about the law, the old law. He was still very religious. He hadn't had his Jesus experience of being overtaken by what Jesus had to say quite yet. And so he looked at Christians as the enemy. He looked at them as the ones who they didn't have it all figured out. They were blind and without understanding. And so he was one of the people who persecuted them. And he thought he was really doing God a favor by shutting these Christians down. And he ended up having what many of us call that Damascus Road experience, where he was blinded and God started speaking to him. Verse 3, it says, and as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. So now he's hearing from Jesus, from heaven. It's like Jesus is saying to him, listen, you got it wrong. I mean, I get that you got good intentions here, but you're persecuting the wrong people. These people that you're coming up against are my people. They don't have it wrong. They got it right. And now I'm getting you on the right track so that you can all be blended in, grafted in, all adopted into the family. And if I can just use that drive that you have, Saul, if I can just use that determination to get the job done, that willingness to do what you believe God wants you to do, if you can use that same drive but use it for good, use it to help the people that you were once persecuting, that right there is what I'm after. I'm going to use that drive that you have. I want to use that determination that you have for good. I'm going to take what you were using for bad, for evil, and using it for good, using it for my glory. So, verse 6 says, and he trembling and astonished said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. Now watch this. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. Let me stop and say this for whoever this is for. Those of you saying, yes, Lord, I'm ready to understand and stand under what you want me to grasp. Here's the thing. You have to understand that there are going to be some folks that you have journeyed with, so to speak, is just using what it says here in verse 7, journey with, the people that journeyed with Saul. You're going to have some friends or those who you quote unquote journey with in your spiritual walk that they're not going to understand, because simply put, they don't want to understand. When God begins to open your eyes up and God begins to use you in a new way, something different from what you have been doing, they'll have a hard time accepting it. They'll just have to stand back and look at you astonished. They'll have to just be in shock that you allowed yourself to be used for what God is trying to do. You've got to understand that when you have your wake-up call, when you have your blinded by the light moment, so to speak, your Damascus Road experience moment, where God really grabs a hold of you and wakes you up, you have to understand that some people journeying with you, some people that have been tagging along with you, you've been buddy with, y'all been walking together, arm in arm, intertwined, hanging out. They might not be hanging out with you so much anymore. They're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know how to keep you looking at things from their perspective. They don't want to look at things from God's perspective. They don't want you to look at things from God's perspective. So you got to be willing to choose God. Otherwise, you're just committing idolatry by picking everything and everybody else over what God has to say. So you got to understand, listen, that doesn't mean you can't love those people anymore. It doesn't mean you can't be good to them. It simply means that you cannot let certain folks hold you back just because, y'all go back. Just because y'all been friends since 1901. Just because, y'all got history, as they say. It doesn't matter how much you've gone through with those people. It just doesn't matter. Listen, if you have to cut some ties just a little bit with some folks to move into what God has for you, you got to do it. Otherwise, some of those people will hold you back for their own security, for their own comfort zone. And that's basically what will be happening. If you give in and you decide to keep blending in and you take a step back instead of moving forward into what God has for you, you'll miss out on the blessings that you're waiting on, that you want so bad. You'll miss out on it. So you can be comfortable and keep hanging with those you've been journeying with, but that's just it. You're just going to you're going to be like the children of Israel. Remember when they were basically going around in circles, going around the mountain? She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. That's it. You're just going to be going, you're going to be right back doing what you were doing, just going around and around and around. Never exiting the wilderness. Never getting to the promised land. Just going round, round, round. Woo, this is fun going in circles. You can only do it so long before you get dizzy and fall out. That's what you're going to do, is just wear yourself out going around and around and around. That's it. That's basically your destiny. If you want to keep trying to blend in and fit in with everybody and just go with the flow of the people instead of going with the flow of the Holy Spirit. I mean, the choice is yours. But like I said, this is supposed to be for those who have said yes. So you have to understand there will be some people that while you're going through your blinded by the light moment, there ain't no light hitting them. They're not getting no wake-up call because they don't want it. So they're just going to stand back looking at you, astonished and surprised and butthurt because they're going to try to make you feel like you're leaving them. You're walking away from them. It's not that you're leaving them hanging. Really, if anything, they're leaving you hanging. If they're willing to be so quick to draw back from you because you're moving forward with God when they don't want to. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. So we see that in verse 7. They're not going to see what you see. They may hear something. They may hear a voice. They'll just be looking around. They're not going to see that light that you see. Verse 8, and Saul arose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man, but they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And he was there 3 days without sight, and neither did eat nor drink. And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias, and to him said the Lord in a vision, Ananias. And he said, Behold, I am here, Lord. And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go into the street which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus. For behold, he prayeth, and hath seen in a vision a man named Ananias coming in, and putting his hand on him, that he might receive his sight. So they lead Saul to the place, and he's just there with no sight, not eating, not drinking. He's just there. And then God gets a hold of one disciple named Ananias to go lay hands on Saul and pray for his sight to be restored. Now, if you notice in verse 8, like I said, they led him, those he was journeying with, they led him to where he needed to go. But once he got there, that was it. They couldn't do anything else from there. They couldn't come up with their own man-made way of restoring Saul's sight. They couldn't go and try to find someone to come into this home to restore his sight. They couldn't lay hands on him and pray for the sight to be restored. They couldn't do anything else. All they could do was only get him so far. And then, once they got him as far as they could take him, that's when God stepped in and said, okay, I'm going to do the rest. Let me finish what I've started. And so he gets someone who's of him to go and pray for Saul. And so with that being said, like I said, whoever this is for, not only will you have some journeymen, folks you've been journeying with that will back up and all they want to do is just watch you in shock. They're not really trying to associate with you and be arm in arm and hand in hand anymore. They're just standing there watching, spectating. But the ones who will try to hold on to you, they're only going to make it so far. They're only going to make it so many footsteps with you before even they have to say, okay, I can't go any further. I can only go so far with you now. I got to stop here. This is where I draw the line. I can't go past this line in the sand. You're going to have to go by yourself. Sorry. I wanted to go with you. I wanted to just follow you as close as I could and benefit a little bit from you and ride your coattails just a little bit while you pay the price and do what you have to do for the Lord, and me not do what I need to do, and me not surrender, and me not be willing to be blinded by the light, me not be willing to get the wake-up call. I don't want to go through all that. I don't want to stand out. I don't want to be putting myself in a position where I might be persecuted. So my plan was to just fall in behind you and just kind of hide behind you and follow you. But now I see I can't even do that. I gotta stay behind this line right here. I can't go there with you. Can't do it. And once it gets to that point, God can send who he needs to help you in the rest of your journey, to help you finish the race that he has set before you. Now that I've gone over the scripture I wanted to go through, let me share some stuff with you. I want to talk to you all about my car. For those of you who know me, you know that Mattathias, the name of this sermon, Mattathias is what I named my car when I first got it. I want to tell you about the car, and I'm going to tell you what has recently happened with my car. But anyway, as some of you know, this past summer, I started driving. 28 years old, just now getting around to getting a driver's license and getting my own car. But anyway, so I start learning how to drive during the summer, right? And what ended up happening was I had said something on Facebook about looking for a vehicle. And this woman that I knew from work came up to me and was telling me that her daughter and her son-in-law had a vehicle that they were about to have to get ready to sell because they were going to move and they didn't want to have to take the vehicle with them. And if I got all the story of what happened correct, basically, long story short, what happened was the couple, they were trying to get back here to Arkansas from Texas. They needed a car, and so they got this particular car, which is now my car. They got this car. I only paid like $200 for it. And they made it here safe and everything, but then afterwards they really didn't have a need for the car. So it's just kind of been sitting there in the yard. And so they're getting ready to move to a different town, and they didn't want to have to haul the car off with them, so they were going to get rid of the car. And so it was just like perfect timing. I was like, okay, let me look into this vehicle, and I ended up buying the car. I only paid like $500 for it. And so, it was cool, and I was very excited to have my first car. And the thing about it is this: if you had asked me prior to the summer, prior to getting ready to learn to drive and all that, if you had asked me prior to all this what car I would want, what vehicle would be my dream vehicle, I would have said a Jeep. I just like Jeeps. But even though for a long time I've wanted a Jeep, once it got close time for me to start learning to drive, and once I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to try to hold on to some money here and there, try to save up the best that I can so that I can try to get something. I really had to be realistic. I had to have my priorities together. And I had to say, okay, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I don't even have money really saved right now. So I got to save up a little something here and there. So that way, once I get the license, I can, go get something and try to make, like little easy payments on it or something. I don't need to try to go and get something big. I don't need to get something expensive. I don't need to get something that's going to be a gas guzzler that's going to, put me in the hole just trying to pay for gas to drive it where I need to go. I need to get something simple instead of something new. Probably get something used, something simple, something small, something, that's just going to get me from point A to point B. That's what I need to be concerned about. I don't need to try to get some vehicle that, I want just because I think it looks cool. I can't be wrapped up in looks when it comes to this. I got to have some maturity about this. And so when I come across this car, I get to see it, walk up to it for the first time. I thought it was a pretty cool looking car. The vehicle, this car that I have that I bought from this couple, it's a Toyota Camry 95, I believe. It's from the mid 90s. And of course, that makes it 20 years old. So it's an older vehicle, and it's got some wear and tear on the outside of it. But I was happy when I first saw it. I was excited. I was like, yes, this is going to be my car. Even before I got in it to try to drive it myself, I just knew when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is cool. This is cool. And it was already cool and I was already excited, but I was extra excited when I found out that it was, a 90s car or made in the mid 90s. And it really tripped me out because that period of time was like my favorite time of music. Like when I was growing up, like 95, 96, 97, the mid 90s, that was around the time that some of my favorite music was out because I was really big into alternative rock music. And that's when a lot of that good alternative rock music started coming out. And then some of the really cool pop music was out too. Like I was really big into Hanson and the Spice Girls and all that, man. And then right there in the mid 90s, they had that song Wanna Be, if you wanna be my lover, you gotta hang with my friends. Gotta hang with my friends. No. That was my jam, man. You can't tell me nothing about that song, man. That was the jam. Don't act like it wasn't, because you know it was. But anyway. But, yeah. But it just tripped me out. I was like, my first car would be from the mid 90s because that's like my era right there. That was like my favorite little time period for music. I just thought that was just super cool. And so yeah, so I got the car, and when I got it, I didn't get to drive it home. Some stuff it came up. I had to go get a new battery, but then I had to get ready to clock in for work, so my mom had to go get somebody else to drive the vehicle to my house for me. So it took a while before I even really started driving it. And then when I got the car, all I really did was drive around in my front yard with it. Like, I didn't actually go anywhere because I didn't want to park it somewhere because I wasn't going to be able to lock all the doors because there was a door locking problem. There was a problem with the locks. So in order for me to lock all the doors, I'd pretty much have to lock myself out of the car because I couldn't unlock it from the outside, only from the inside. So I was like, I don't want to take my car somewhere and have all the doors unlocked. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to just leave it here in the yard. And if I want to drive, I'll just practice kind of going around the front yard. Just, but anyway, so there was that. And it took me a while before I finally got out on the road and started driving around because I wanted to figure out how to fix the lock issue, and I got it fixed. And so I started driving around. And when I started driving around, that's when I really, really knew it was my car. Like, I was like, yes, this is my car. This is it. And the reason why is because it felt right. You might be thinking, what? It felt right? What are you talking about? Well, let me explain. Well, before I explain, let me tell you this, because this ties into it. So, like, I think a couple of weeks ago or so, I was talking to a friend of mine from years ago, from like high school, back when we were in marching band together. We were talking, and she was talking about relationships. And she was talking about, a lot of her relationships in the past. She was just with people that, just weren't good to her. And then finally, when it came to the guy that she's with now, that she's married to, she was talking about how she just knew he was just like a gift of God to her, which is funny because that's the name of my car, Mattathias, gift of God. That's the name that I chose to give to my car. And by the way, Mattathias, the name Mattathias, is found in Luke chapter 3. But anyway, she was saying, he's from God. I know he's from God. And the reason why this relationship is just so perfect, why it's just so amazing, is because it feels right. It just feels right. Everything feels right, and that's how you know you've got the one. When you have the one God has for you, it's gonna feel right. It's not gonna be awkward. You're not gonna, you're not gonna have to try to force it. You're not gonna have to be fighting all the time. You're just gonna know when you're with that person, you're going to feel so comfortable around them. It's just going to feel right. Everything about it is going to feel right. And the funny thing about my car, which I consider a gift from God, is that it feels right. What I mean is this: when I first started learning to drive, of course, I didn't have the car yet. So when I was learning, I was in other people's vehicles. So my mom was letting me drive around a bit in her car, then a friend of mine from church, and then another friend of mine in her truck, and then another friend of mine in her sister's vehicle, because her sister was letting her drive her vehicle. So here I am driving. Whenever I get the time to drive around in somebody's vehicle, there's at least 4 different vehicles I'm driving around in whenever I get the chance to practice. And in some folks' vehicles, it's like, I have to work extra hard to turn the steering wheel when I try to turn, and, I got to press down extra hard on the gas and on the brake to get it to go and stop. And then in other people's vehicles, it's like I barely turn the steering wheel and the car is just like, it just jerks, or I barely put my foot down on the gas and it just goes, and I put my foot down on the brake and it just jerks to a stop. And I even remember one time when I was in one person's car and I was driving, I was still, and I put my foot on the gas, and all of a sudden it was like, you would have thought I just slammed my foot on the gas and the wheels were just spinning like crazy. And in my mind, I barely even put my foot on the pedal. But I was just like, man, like, what's the deal here? It's like, I know I'm not pressing down that hard on it. Like, what's the deal, But it just seemed like I had to go out of my way to get comfortable in every person's car, because nothing felt comfortable. It was like I either wasn't trying hard enough or I had to try too hard to make it work. And so when I first started driving in my car, everything felt right. Once I got that seat adjusted, I felt comfortable in the seat. It was like, even how when I'm sitting there and I'm looking out of the window, it's like I see more of the road. Like I can see more over the hood of my car than I could in other people's cars. No matter how much I adjusted the seat, it was like I just couldn't see enough that was going to be comfortable for me in my mind. Enough of the road. I couldn't see enough over the hood. But in my car, it's like I see just the right amount of road, the right amount of my car. I feel comfortable. I don't feel like I'm sitting too high, too low. The steering wheel feels right. I don't have to turn it too much or turn it too little and then it starts jerking. When I put my foot on the pedal, it's just right. Like when I press on it, it barely goes. And then when I press to go faster, it goes to speed that I want it to go. When I put my foot on the brake, I don't come to a, halt so fast that I jerk myself. Everything just feels right. I was like, man, this feels good. Like everything for this is perfect. It's just perfect. And so that's how I feel about that gift from God, that car. It just feels right. It feels like it's mine. It feels like I'm meant to have it. Like it makes sense. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is good. Everybody else's vehicle, it was fine for me to train in, but they just weren't my vehicle. It didn't fit me. It didn't fit my personality. It didn't fit my touch. But this right here, yeah, this is just right. So with that said, let me say this, with the whole everything about it feeling right. Here's the thing that has happened, and some of y'all already know this, but a while back, I had to put my car in a shop to let it get work done, right? I told y'all about that. Well, last week, I had to get it work done again. I was at work, and when I got off that morning, I went to my car, and, everybody that works there, we park behind this fence. And so I pull out, and I make my way around, and I'm getting ready to get to the opening of this fence to exit out and to turn. And so, like, I'm sitting there because, you got to stop before you turn. And so, as I start turning, I'm turning, and all of a sudden, the car just dies. It just dies right there. And the steering wheel and everything was locking up. So I was doing the best I could to turn it to make the car go over in the grass so I could get it off the road so that other people could, get out. Everybody that was trying to leave could get out. And so it was like every time I tried to start it, it just wouldn't start. It was sounding like it was going to start, but it just wouldn't start. And I couldn't figure out what the deal was. It wasn't the battery because the lights were still coming on, and I knew I had got all this new stuff done to it. I'm thinking, what could it be? So anyway, I ended up finding out what it was. But before I tell you what it was, because this is going to be good, but let me skip over that part. So some days go by, and so finally I get ready to go get the car, right? So I was at this place. It wasn't the shop that the car got worked on, but it was parked at a different shop. And so I went to go talk to the guy, and he's talking to me about, what all he had done to the car and everything. And he's like, well, before you go, let me just check your fluids real quick and look and make sure everything else that I didn't need to work on is still running good real quick. And I was like, okay. And so while he's doing all that, I'm standing there, and the woman that I pay my rent to, the landlady, she pulls up because she was wanting to meet me for me to pay, my part of rent for the month. And I was like, well, I'm about to be over here at the shop. And she was like, oh, well, I got to be there too. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just meet you there. You don't have to come by my house. Just meet me there since you're going to be there anyway. And I have to be there. So she pulls up, and I go up to her to the window to give her, And so I was just telling her, because she was looking at my car, and I was just telling her, yeah, this is what was wrong with it. And, he got it fixed for me, blah, blah, blah. And so she starts talking about some place I could go to out of town somewhere where I could get this paint job done on the car and da-da-da-da-da. And like I said, she's my landlady, I respect her, and I was listening. I was, I didn't say nothing. I was listening. But in my mind, I was thinking, man, I don't care nothing about getting no paint job done on this car. All I'm concerned about is what's going on under the hood. All I'm concerned about is what's going to get me from point A to point B. I'm not concerned about the, how, the paint job is worn in some spots or on some spots of the car. I'm not concerned about that. I can't put money into all that right now. If I got some money, I need to make sure that what's going on under the hood is taken care of. That's all I'm concerned about right now. That's it. If everything's good under the hood, I'm just saving up money until, next time something else happens, and then I can have money for it because I didn't spend it on getting a new paint job, And but that's just what I was thinking, But so anyway, with that said, what ended up being the issue for the car was that the timing belt, there's a belt inside called a timing belt, and the guy was explaining how it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter that I got new stuff under the hood already from the last time I got the car worked on. The reality of it is, if that timing belt is broken or something's wrong with it, it doesn't matter. Nothing else that would make the car go is gonna work. It's all about this timing belt. Oh, this is funny. So with that said, let me say this. It's all about God's timing. You can have a lot of good stuff going on. You can have a lot of nice, pretty, fancy stuff going on in your life. You have some good-looking folks around you. Nice money flow. Pockets full of money, wallet as big as your thighs. It's not going to matter Oh my goodness. It's not going to matter if it's not God's time yet. He can have everything set into place, almost like it's ready for God to press play on a remote controller to get it to go. But until it's his timing, it's not all going to play out like it's supposed to. God's got that, I'm going to call it that timing belt that's just going to hold it all together. So for those of you who, since last week's sermon, you've been waiting, thinking, okay, I'm listening, God, I'm waiting, I'm ready for what you have, just know it's going to happen, but it's all in God's perfect timing. No matter how much you think you got it all together, no matter how much I think I got it all together, it's all about God's perfect timing. And let me say this real quick. I posted a picture of the car up when I first got it during the summer. And all I showed was, the front of the car. And you didn't see the back of the car. Not that I was ashamed to post it. I just didn't see a point. I just wanted you to see what the front of the car looks like. If you're going to post a picture of any angle of the car, more than likely it's going to be the front, unless you got some type of fancy design on the side that you might, you know what I mean? But other than that, chances are you're going to show the car from the front, maybe from the side, just how it is. But it just so happens that on the back side of the car, what you can't see unless you actually see the car in person is on the back side. That's where a lot of the paint is just, the paint job is just screwed. That's why, she was saying something about I could go get a paint job somewhere, blah, blah, blah. But the paint has been just worn. It's just worn off. It looks rough back there. And then also, when it comes to the front of the car, and you can't see it really in the picture because you have to be up close to the car in person and kind of on the side of the front to see it. But on the driver's side, that left-hand side, the light, you can look under the light and you can kind of see where the car is just, you can tell it's been dented in some. It's not, like I said, it's not major. You can't really notice it from far back, but when you get up on it, you can kind of see where it's been hit. You can tell the car's been in a wreck before, and it's been hit. And what you don't know is that because of that, the light has a hard time, that headlight has a hard time staying intact. So if you put the light intact, it'll just sit there and look fine. It did for the picture. But if I were to go driving around, eventually that light will fall and it'll just be hanging by this wire that just keeps it, hanging on. This wire that's inside the car just keeps it hanging on until you stick it back in place. Or if I were to raise the hood up to look at something under the hood, once I let that hood down and pop that hood, that light will fall off again, right, and just be hanging by that wire. So what I've done since taking the picture, what I've had to do is I got some tape, and it's this black tape that I used, and put it around the outer area of the light to keep it held on. And the funny thing about it is, on cars, and some of y'all probably have noticed this, on cars, when you look at them from the front, a lot of cars, they look like a face. And the lights look like eyes, like the eyes, the eyes on the face. So since I got that black tape around the light, it looks almost like my car has a black eye. So I joke and I say, yeah, my car, it's got a black eye, it's been through some things, but and my nickname for it is Left Eye. Like Lisa Left Eye Lopez from that R&B group TLC, they had the song Waterfalls. Don't go chasing waterfalls, right? And she had that what looked like some black tape under her eye, under her left eye. You know what I'm talking about? So they called her Left Eye. So that's my little nickname for the car, Left Eye, because it's got the black around the eye. But anyway, but yeah. So on the outside, it doesn't look all that fancy. Matter of fact, the only thing I've really done to the outside of the car, other than give it a good washing, The only thing I've really done is I've added a couple of things. I got a plate that I put on the front of the car that I bought online. It's black and it's got this Jesus fish that says Jesus in it, and it's all rainbow colored. Obviously, right? And so then on the back window, I have a Team Valor sticker because, of course, I play Pokemon Go, and I'm like one of the few people I know around here that's got a Team Valor sticker on their car, because most people, even if they play the game, they're not nerdy enough to actually put a big old sticker on the car, a Pokemon decal sticker on the car. So I added a couple of things, but it wasn't something that fixed the outside issues with it. I just added a couple of things so that if people see the car, they're going to know it's mine. They'll look and say, oh, it's got that rainbow, the rainbow gay Christian tag on the front, and then on the back it's got that Team Valor Pokemon sticker. This must be Kobe's car, because ain't nobody else's car around here gonna look like that. So it's just something that I did so that you'll know it's mine. You'll know it's my baby. You know what I mean? And so with that said, I don't care what people think about the outside of my car, how the outside of it looks. In fact, I actually enjoy the fact that there will be people that if my car was parked somewhere and lined up with some other cars, I like the fact that if somebody was walking by, they might not even really pay much attention to my car. They might not even think much of my car compared to some other fancier, newer, up-to-date, prettier cars than mine. I enjoy that. I don't have to, that's less likely I got to worry about somebody trying to steal the car, if anything, because, if you're going to risk being locked up for taking a vehicle, chances are you're going to take something that's going to be worth taking. You know what I mean? You ain't going to take some $500 car. You're probably not going to do it. You're just not going to do it. So it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me what people think at all. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what's on the inside. Get it? With that being said, whoever is out there listening, if you're waiting on some gift from God, maybe you need a new vehicle yourself, you need a new home, you want a husband or a wife, you're looking for a better job, a financial blessing, you're looking for a breakthrough in your health, you're looking for all kinds of different things, you're looking for a gift from God, something that only God can pull off, something miraculous. You need God to do something just for you. And he's going to do it. You've been obedient. You said, okay, Lord, I'm here. I believe you. I understand you. I'm willing to stand under what you want me to stand under. And he's got something for you. Just a couple of things, or a few things. One, like I said earlier, be willing to accept the reality that some people cannot move forward with you. That's one thing. Two, you got to know that it's all in God's timing. And finally, last but not least, it's not about the outside of what God is fixing to bring to you. What matters is what's under the hood, so to speak. What matters is what's on the inside. God looks on the heart of man, while man looks on the outward appearance. You might not have a fancy Jeep coming your way. You might have a little Toyota Camry from the 90s that's jacked up on the back and kind of busted up on the front. Might have a black eye. Might have an eye hanging out. You know what I mean? Like my car. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is what's on the inside. Because it can look nice. Whatever God has for you, it can look nice on the outside. It can look nice. But is that really going to help you? If the inside is nothing. I think I've made my point. I'm going to pray us out here. Heavenly Father, I thank you for another time to minister another word. Lord, I ask that whoever needs this message would tune in, that they would hear this word. Lord, let your people know that because of their obedience, because they're true believers in you, because they want to serve you with all their heart, because they really want to go the distance and be willing to get out of their comfort zone and really go to another level with you in you. Let them know that, yes, you have some things for them. You've got things. You've got things. You've got people lined up ready. But, Lord, let people know, let people understand and stand under the reality that it can't be about the outside, regardless of the opinions of man. They have to have a heart like yours, God. A heart that says, I want to look on the heart of others. I want to look on the inside of things. I want to accept the reality that one person's trash is another person's treasure. Because it could be that what is trash to others is the very treasure, God, that you have for some of your people. Lord, I thank you. I give you the praise, the glory, and the honor. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen.